September 7th, 1940. Whitehall, London. Rain-slicked streets reflect the dim glow of gas lamps. The air is thick with the scent of coal smoke and fear. Across the city, sirens have been blaring for hours, but inside the Ministry of Defense, time seems to move differently. In a small, cramped room at the heart of the operations center, a group of men in stiff suits argue over maps pinned to the walls. Thick chalk lines trace the supposed paths of incoming Luftwaffe raids. They speak with confidence, their voices clipped, almost ritualistic, as though repeating a script that history itself has handed them. Each officer believes instinct, experience, and gut feeling are the only tools capable of predicting where bombs will fall. Logic, it seems, is secondary. A young civilian analyst sits in the corner, her back straight, her pencil hovering over a sheet of graph paper. Her hair is pinned back neatly, but her eyes are sharp and restless. She is barely 25, with no uniform, no rank, and no battlefield experience, yet she holds a secret weapon the generals cannot yet comprehend: mathematics. Not the abstract kind that fills university textbooks, but the kind that distills chaos into patterns, the kind that turns fear into forecast. She sketches curves, marking the angles and distances between known bomb strikes, plotting probability distributions that suggest an invisible rhythm behind the chaos. To her, the raids are not random. They are statistical events, and statistics, unlike intuition, do not lie. The room is thick with tension. A general slams his fist on the table, making the maps jump. "We can't protect everywhere," he shouts. "We don't have the fighters, we don't have the guns. We have to make a choice, and it has to be the obvious one." Others nod, fear sharpening their agreement. They discuss strategy like chess players, moving pieces across a board that represents a city in flames. The young analyst speaks up, her voice soft but unwavering. "If you redistribute defenses according to these probability curves, fewer civilians will be hit. We can anticipate the next wave based on past strike data." The laughter is immediate. It cuts through the smoke-filled room like a blade. The men look at her as though she has suggested something impossible, dangerous, even foolish. "Probability?" One of the older officers scoffs, shaking his head. "This is war, not a classroom. We fight the enemy with courage and steel, not with numbers on a page." Others chuckle. Their confidence is a fortress, but it is brittle, built on tradition and the comforting weight of history rather than evidence. The young analyst's hands do not tremble. She has spent weeks combing through bomb reports, cross-referencing maps, and calculating where logic, not luck, will guide the raids. She knows she is right. The paradox is cruel. Her clarity exists in a room full of decision-makers who cannot yet see it. Outside, the city waits, unaware of the quiet battle unfolding within. Londoners huddle in shelters, clutching children, whispering prayers into the darkness. Factory sirens scream, signaling evacuation and panic. The blitz has begun in earnest. Across rooftops, incendiaries fall in orange streaks, and the smell of smoke drifts into the ears of those still awake. The analyst looks at her maps, tracing the paths of bombs that have already struck and projecting the likely course of the next wave. Her pencil moves quickly, almost instinctively, as if the paper itself will absorb the logic and whisper it back to the city. She sketches a line of high probability that diverges sharply from the general's assumptions. If her calculations are correct, the next strike will fall miles from the points of expected impact. If she is wrong, lives will be lost. A captain leans over her shoulder, frowning. "What are you doing? That line makes no sense." His voice carries condescension, the assumption that youth and civilian status are synonymous with error. She does not flinch. The patterns don't follow intuition. They follow distribution. History repeats statistically, not predictably. Her words are precise, almost mechanical, yet carry a moral weight that cannot be ignored. Outside, distant explosions punctuate the air, like drumbeats signaling that the argument is no longer abstract. Minutes pass like hours. The room grows hotter from the pressure and fear, the smoke curling in the corners where no one notices. The generals continue to debate, their pride and adherence to protocol creating a deafening wall of resistance. Yet the analyst persists, laying out graphs, explaining variance, demonstrating that randomness itself has structure. The paradox is painful and undeniable. Teenagers with chalk outsmarting admirals who command fleets and squadrons. History, in this moment, has handed her an impossible task and yet a profound opportunity to save lives with nothing but intellect and determination. A messenger bursts into the room, breathless, shaking with urgency. Reports of incoming raids from radar stations clatter across the table. Officers grab the maps, shouting over each other, trying to predict where the next strikes will land. The young analyst steps forward, pointing to her projection. The room falls silent for a heartbeat, broken only by the distant roar of aircraft engines. She speaks again, firmer this time. If you place anti-aircraft batteries here and divert fighter patrols along these predicted paths, the probability of civilian casualties drops by nearly 40%. The generals exchange glances. The senior officer's jaw tightens. You're a civilian. You have no command. This is not your place. His tone is final, meant to dismiss her entirely. And yet, in that same moment, the wail of sirens from the east hints at the unfolding truth. Either she is correct, or the chaos she has predicted will claim its victims. Outside, London waits for fate to reveal itself. Smoke rises over rooftops. Fires flicker like trembling candles in the night. The paradox lingers in the air. A room full of men with authority, power, and experience, yet blind to the logic in front of them. And one young woman, armed only with paper, pencil, and courage, standing against the tide of convention, ready to prove that knowledge, when wielded with conviction, can be more powerful than rank. And then, as if the city itself were holding its breath, the first wave begins to descend, and it does not follow the general's maps. Bombs fall elsewhere, missing predicted targets by miles. Cries erupt from shelters, but the streets designated for protection remain largely untouched. The young analyst's calculations, mocked only moments before, are validated by the tragic poetry of reality. She exhales, but there is no triumph in her eyes, only the weight of responsibility. She has predicted the chaos, but she has not stopped it. The room is silent. Shock replaces laughter. Officers stare at maps and reports as if seeing them for the first time. The paradox persists. The civilian, the outsider, the one who dared to challenge authority, has outmaneuvered institutional blindness. Yet she is not celebrated. Not yet. Outside, London's skyline burns in flickering orange, a reminder of what is at stake, and the city waits to learn which voices it will choose to trust in the days to come. In the quiet aftermath, a single question hangs in the air, heavier than smoke or fear. If those who understood the truth first were ignored, how many lives will be lost before the world finally listens? This version is immersive, human-centered, and cinematic, matching the lest we forget tone, and is over 950 words. October 1940. RAF Operations Research Section, London. The air smells of wet ink, cigarette smoke, and the faint tang of fear that never seems to leave these walls. Blackout curtains are drawn tightly against the dim glow of gas lamps, but the chaos outside still creeps through cracks in the building. London's nights have become a canvas of fire and shadow, the sky punctuated by the wail of sirens and the distant thrum of engines. The Blitz is relentless, a mechanical pulse of destruction that makes the human mind quiver. Yet inside this cramped office, time seems to bend differently, slowing, sharpening, as though the fate of the city itself has been condensed into every pencil stroke and whispered calculation. The young civilian analyst sits hunched over a cluttered desk, surrounded by stacks of bombing reports, maps, and statistical tables. Her eyes are rimmed with exhaustion, but there is a fierce intensity in them that no amount of sleepless nights can diminish. Every strike report she receives is another piece of a puzzle only she seems capable of seeing. Her hands move with precision, plotting distributions, angles, and distances, transforming what everyone else perceives as random terror into discernible patterns. The paradox is stark. She is a civilian, armed with nothing more than intellect and sheer determination, working to solve a problem that generals and admirals, with fleets and squadrons at their command, cannot. Patterns, she mutters under her breath, tracing a line of projected strikes that diverges sharply from conventional predictions. A colleague leans over, eyebrows knitted. You really think these calculations matter? The pilots don't fly by numbers, and the bombers don't land where you say. She does not look up. It's not about orders. It's about probability. If we shift defenses to follow where chaos will likely strike, we can save thousands of lives. The room is filled with murmurs. Other analysts glance at her charts nervously, aware of the tension between revolutionary insight and institutional hierarchy. They understand, on some level, that she might be right, but to say so aloud risks ridicule or worse. The paradox is unbearable. Knowledge exists here, yet power refuses to recognize it. Her hands continue their dance, pencils scratching against paper, producing lines that predict the next wave of terror before it arrives. The city outside remains oblivious, yet entirely dependent on her calculations. She stands suddenly, moving to the large wall map that dominates the room. Pins, strings, and notes create a chaotic tapestry of previous raids. She places a red pin at the coordinates of the last strike and draws an invisible curve in the air, demonstrating the predicted trajectory of the next. "We are looking at the wrong areas," she tells a room, voice steady, unwavering. "The bombers will follow paths of least resistance. History, data, and pattern all point here." A senior officer steps forward, his face a mask of disbelief and irritation. "And you expect us to trust this? This theory over years of operational experience?" His tone drips with condescension, yet beneath it is a flicker of doubt. The paradox grows heavier with every word. She is a civilian, inexperienced, yet she sees what seasoned veterans cannot. "Experience is important," she says quietly, "but experience without data is just tradition. And tradition is what will kill people tonight if we do not act." Outside, the first wave of bombers drifts over the city, engines low and ominous. The sound is a reminder that this is not a theoretical exercise. Every decision, every calculation, is a matter of life and death. She pulls a small notebook from her pocket, scribbling angles, wind speeds, and bomber speeds with meticulous care. The numbers form a lattice of survival, a fragile framework that can hold the weight of thousands of lives, if interpreted correctly. The room grows tense as officers gather around the wall map, for the first time listening to her reasoning with something like attention. Hours pass. The city shakes intermittently with distant explosions. Fires light the night sky in brief, flickering bursts, illuminating the faces of those trying to navigate darkness. She moves from desk to desk, pointing out trends, interpreting probabilities, and predicting the next likely targets. Her logic is simple yet revolutionary. Anticipate chaos, do not simply react to it. Yet convincing the RAF, steeped in protocol and rank, proves nearly impossible. Every recommendation she makes is questioned, every projection challenged. She answers each challenge not with anger, but with evidence, data distilled into actionable intelligence, numbers translated into moral responsibility. A young RAF officer finally breaks the tension. "If we follow her predictions, we can redeploy squadrons tonight and protect factories and hospitals that were previously exposed." His voice carries hope, but also fear. Hope, because the numbers promise protection. Fear, because defying protocol could ruin careers, or worse. The civilian analyst looks at him, her eyes unwavering. "It's not about careers," she says. "It's about survival." The room falls silent, the weight of her words settling over everyone present like the ash from the fires outside. Night deepens, and the analysts and officers work side by side, tension and urgency shaping their every movement. Maps are redrawn, anti-aircraft batteries repositioned, and fighter patrols redeployed according to lines only she could have calculated. The paradox persists. The outsider is now orchestrating the defense, her insight bending the machinery of war without formal authority. She moves from chart to chart, correcting assumptions, calculating angles of descent, noting wind drift, and even the smallest variations in aircraft performance. Outside, London waits, unaware that its survival is momentarily entrusted to a 25-year-old civilian woman with a pencil. The first alarms of the night echo across the room. Reports of incoming raids arrive in fragmented bursts over the radio. Officers tense, eyes flicking from radar screens to maps, from reports to her calculations. Then the first flashes appear on the horizon, and reality validates theory. Bombs begin to fall not where tradition predicted, but precisely along the arcs she outlined. Factory districts that had been previously unprotected remain untouched. Shelters and hospitals, now covered by redeployed squadrons, endure the storm with minimal casualties. The room exhales collectively, some faces pale with shock, others with relief. Her numbers have saved lives, but the recognition is not theirs to give, at least not yet. Even as the city outside trembles, she continues her work, tracing trajectories, recalculating probabilities for the next wave, refining her models with every observation. The paradox endures. The very institution that mocked her insight is now dependent upon it. She does not claim victory. There is no time for celebration. Every saved life is tempered by the knowledge that hundreds more remain at risk. And as the night stretches on, punctuated by sirens and explosions, the realization grows clear. Knowledge can bend chaos, but it cannot eliminate it. By the end of the night, as dawn begins to break and the fires burn lower, the analysts gather the data, documenting outcomes, successes, and failures. The senior officer who had doubted her approaches quietly. "Your calculations, they were correct," he says, almost as if admitting it aloud might fracture the reality they all cling to. She does not respond. Recognition is not important now. What matters is that the city survived, that thousands are alive to see another day. Outside, London begins to wake to destruction. Yet in some pockets, life continues because someone dared to challenge authority, tradition, and skepticism itself. The young analyst leans back in her chair, exhausted, eyes fixed on the maps. She knows this night is only one of many. The paradox is cruel and persistent. Her work will be repeated, institutionalized, and eventually anonymized. The victories will be recorded, but her name will remain absent from most reports. Yet she has glimpsed the truth. Intellect and courage, even without authority, can bend the arc of history, however quietly. Outside, the city breathes, scarred but surviving, and she wonders, quietly, whether the world will ever truly listen to those who see clearly before it is too late. This chapter is over 1,000 words, cinematic, human-centered, and deeply immersive, matching the lest we forget style with moral tension, paradox, and historical realism. Spring 1941. Britain is still standing, but the scars of the Blitz are etched into every street and skyline. Smoke rises from chimneys that survived fires, and rubble lies in long, jagged stretches where homes once stood. London is waking, cautious and fragile, like a city that has seen death and is learning, slowly, to breathe again. Inside the quiet offices of the RAF Operations Research Section, the young civilian analyst is at her desk, surrounded by reports, maps, and records of the past months. The war has moved on, but the weight of what she accomplished lingers, heavy and unacknowledged. Her calculations saved factories, hospitals, and thousands of civilians, yet the machinery of bureaucracy has absorbed her work and erased her name. Victory, in her case, is anonymous, a moral triumph without public recognition. She flips through the night-by-night reports, tracing the arc of saved lives like a hidden signature across the city. Each successful prediction is a victory of intellect over chaos, probability over instinct, Yet the official dispatches never mention her. Instead, the reports speak of standard operational procedure and improved resource allocation. Admirals and generals receive praise. The pilots who carried out redeployed missions are honored. The civilian analyst, the architect of the strategy, remains invisible. The paradox is unbearable. She bent the war to logic, yet history will remember only the machinery, not the mind that guided it. Outside, London hums with the tentative rhythms of life returning. Street vendors call out to customers. Children play among ruins, and trains carry workers to factories rebuilt under blackout skies. Survivors glance upward when sirens wail, a reflex honed over months of terror. The city owes its continued survival, in no small part, to calculations traced by a pencil across sheets of paper in a small, dimly lit office. Yet no brass medal is pinned to her coat. No newspaper celebrates her courage. History, she knows, prefers names that carry authority, not those that quietly bend fate with intellect. And so she continues her work, unheralded but unwavering, refining models, analyzing past patterns, preparing for the inevitability of future raids. Her colleagues speak softly among themselves, aware of her contributions but cautious to mention them aloud. She was right. One mutters to another, voice trembling with admiration and frustration. Everything she predicted, it worked. The words linger in the air, almost sacramental. The paradox deepens. Brilliance is acknowledged in whispers, yet never in print, never in the annals of official history. Outside the office, city life masks the tension, the shadow of mortality, and the invisible hand that saved thousands. The young analyst moves from desk to desk, checking projections, recalculating, annotating maps. She has become the quiet sentinel of London, her vigilance as constant as the hum of the city she protects.